Hello there, and welcome to the Successful Work Transitions webinar. Thank you for being punctual. What I do find, though, is quite a few people join a few minutes late because they haven't yet registered for StreamYard. So I'm just going to give people a couple of minutes to drip feed in. But I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear about what work transitions are on your mind right now. Please use the chat. You can use private message in the chat as well if you'd like. I'd love to hear what's on your mind so that I can make this session as useful as possible for you and tailor it as much as possible. But the whole idea of today really is to think a bit differently about work transitions. Know you're not alone if you're going through some tough changes right now, and ideas for what you can do proactively. So please do share in the chat what work transition is on your mind right now. Or is there anything in particular about work transitions you're really hoping to hear about today? Welcome to those who are joining us. This is Successful Work Transitions webinar. I'm Anharad Ross, and we're going to get going in a couple of minutes. But in the meantime, please do use the chat if you'd like to share what work transitions are on your mind right now, or anything in particular that you're hoping to get out of today. And I'll get going in a minute. There is a private message function if you would prefer to use that. Oh, I've had a private message through. I'm in the middle of a reorganization and don't identify myself with the company values anymore. Thank you for sharing that. That's quite a common one at the moment, actually. I hear a lot about reorganizations and change in organizations. Sometimes people's roles changing and evolving. And I'm actually going to share a real client example today, anonymized, of course, on that very topic. So hopefully you'll find that helpful. And don't forget, there's a Q&A at the end where we can delve into some of your particular challenges in a little bit more detail. But please do use the chat throughout. Share what work transitions are on your mind or things in particular that you'd like to hear about today. I'm going to get going now as people are starting to drip feed in. So hello, welcome to Successful Work Transitions webinar. Today is all about thinking differently about work transitions, knowing you're not alone if you're going through change at work, and also ideas for what you can do differently. So we're going to talk about why work transitions are important, key elements for successful work transitions with some anonymized client stories to help bring it to life a little bit. There will, of course, be a plug for what I do, bear with me. And there's also going to be a Q&A at the end. So what do we mean by work transitions? Well, work transitions can be a whole host of things. Obvious ones are maybe a promotion or changing companies, but it could also be roles evolving through reorganizations, as we've heard from someone on the call today. It could be a change in work hours. It could be going part-time. It could be going back to full-time from part-time. It could be returning from maternity leave or a length of paternity leave, sick leave, sabbatical, as I went on once. It could be going through a career change or taking a moment to pause to think about what you want to do next and wanting to activate a change for yourself. It could be making a big decision about change at work. It could be that you've gone through a period of redundancies, either affected or not affected. It could be change in responsibilities or change in contract. It could be becoming a line manager for the first time. Loads and loads of changes. They say that on average, you probably go through a change at work once every year and a significant change every 18 months to 2 years. So it's actually really common, but we don't focus on it as much as we should do. So that's what today is about. I work with a lot of people going through change at work, and they struggle often because they underestimate the difficulties of change, even positive change. They feel like they're expected to manage everything alone. And I think that gets even more the case the more senior you get, because there's this expectation, you've been through it before, you'll be fine, crack on. But that doesn't mean it's any less difficult. Often when we're going through change, there's so much happening. We're rushing, we're feeling overwhelmed by the lack of time to reflect, plan, and adjust. Expectations are really high. And rarely does change happen only at work, right? Often our changes at work affect our whole lives because it might mean a change in routine, it might mean a change in commute. There's all sorts of knock on impacts it can have, can't it? Going through change can lead to confidence wobbles, and that's totally normal and natural. A lot of people also get advice from friends and colleagues, which is really important. I will talk about that today. But they often feel frustrated that that approach leads to a lack of new perspectives and actionable ideas. And we'll talk about why that's the case. So, change is really hard for lots of different reasons, and people really struggle with it. But that's why I do what I do. So, a quick bit on me. Hello, I'm Anne Harrod Ross. And I've got first-hand experience. I've got over 16 years of leadership experience in global corporates like Johnson & Johnson, Reckitt, Premier Food. And I worked out in those kind of 16 plus years of my corporate experience, I had over 15 work transitions. Now, some of them were bigger than others, some of them were smaller things, but all that change. And particularly as I got more senior, that became more and more challenging with less support. And so now I do what I wish I'd had, which is support to get through change in a really positive way so that you come out better and quicker than you anticipated. So I'm a qualified executive coach. I'm an accredited senior practitioner with the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. That sounds fancy, but essentially just means I meet a certain set of criteria and sign up to professional conduct, which helps keep the quality high. And I'm not a stereotypical coach. I don't have an HR background, and my personality preferences for anybody who's into all those kinds of things, which I'm fascinated by. If you're into Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENTJ. If you're into insights, color profiling, I am blue, red, green, yellow. Or DISC, I am a DC. All of that essentially means that I'm really direct, I'm really challenging, I like getting straight to the point, but I also love detail and understanding what's going on and a bit of structure. So I bring that into my work. You'll probably get a feel for that today. So why is it important to focus on successful work transitions? Well, there's such an amazing opportunity to take control of your own ship, steer your own ship towards fantastic opportunities for growth. They're not just opportunities for resetting our careers, but also personal growth. It's a great opportunity to focus on our development. It can affect long-term progress and success. I'm sure we can all reflect on a time where we've handled change better than others and the impact that that can have over the long term. But the interesting thing about change and transitions, which I find fascinating, is you've actually got a really narrow window to act on this change to really optimize it. So acting quickly gives you a much better shot at future success and staying ahead. But delaying, if we're going to stick with the boat analogy, delaying means you can miss the boat, slow your own growth, and fall behind your peers. And that was always something personally that really motivated me. I'm quite competitive. So if anybody's ever been kayaking, I love a bit of the outdoors. There's a picture of me here and my husband. You'll know that the person at the front is responsible for the pace and the momentum of the boat. And the person at the back is responsible for steering. But the tough thing with change in our careers is we've got to play both of those roles at the same time. We've got to have that pace and momentum, but we've also got to steer our own ship and take control and be deliberate. Another reason why it's important to focus on successful work transitions is stress and emotional well-being. Change is tough. It leads to anxiety and frustration. And a huge part of that is because the human brain has this bit in it called the amygdala. And that is our emotions processing center. And it's also a key part of our fight or flight system, I suppose. And it likes predictability. It likes structure. It likes routine. It doesn't like it when things change and it can't be predicting the future. So we're wired that if there's a rustle in the bush and we don't know what that is, that we immediately go, must be a lion, go into that fight or flight. And that's what change does to us. It puts us in that fight or flight often, even when it's a really exciting, positive change. It's that kind of fluttery kind of fear and anxiety. And We want to get through it quickly because we want that predictability again for our brains. But it's not always that simple, and that can make us feel frustrated because it doesn't happen as quickly as we want. And often these feelings can escalate, and it can affect our personal well-being as well as our professional performance. But we know that immediate action can change all of that. It can lift those negative emotions, it can make things smoother, enjoyable as well. We want these changes to be as enjoyable as they can be, even if it is something initially that starts off not being enjoyable or challenging. We want it to be enjoyable, and we want it to be productive and do something positive for us. But delaying our action because of that narrow window we have can result in prolonged stress, decreased job satisfaction, and as many of my clients have described to me, major loss of mojo. And then the final reason why it's really important to focus on successful work transitions is confidence. So as our careers progress, that expectation of confidence and control increases. You're expected to be that swan. I had an experience when I stepped into quite a chunky leadership role, and I was starting to feel a bit overwhelmed, and it was a lot, and it was all right. It's just these things happen. And I said to my manager, "Oh, it's a lot. I'm feeling quite overwhelmed, and there's all these things." And they just said, "Look, if you can't hack it, there's like 15 people behind you that want this role, so crack on." It's like, wow, we're not going to be talking about emotions anymore, are we? I realized at that point I needed to go and find support elsewhere because I just wasn't going to get it. And when you're in these situations, those feelings of being an imposter or not being able to manage the overwhelm or anything, and our confidence might be knocked, it can be really crippling, and it can lead into these kind of negative cycles, can't they? These kind of, we call them confidence spirals. So it's really important to nip it in the bud so that you don't hold yourself back. But if we don't do it quickly, again, in that narrow window, we can lose credibility quite quickly because people notice when you feel stressed or lacking confidence. And we don't want to feel frustrated, and we don't want to be overlooked for other opportunities like promotions. Oh, I keep forgetting to explain my pictures. I put them in for little stories and I forget them. So this is a shot from Instagram when I went on sabbatical and I wanted to do all the things I've been planning to do for years. One of them was to train to be a gym instructor. And every Thursday night now I teach women over 30 to lift weights. But I enjoy that kind of thing, but I'm certainly not from that kind of background. And I turned up to do my practical bit of my qualification, and there were all these really fit, strong people. They've been going to the gym their whole lives and everything. And I felt really intimidated. I thought, oh my goodness, I do not belong here. Take me back to corporate. But you know what? They were so welcoming, and they kept reminding me of my strengths and what I brought to this. And I'd done all the same coursework as them, the same exams as them. I'd done all the same materials as them and training as them. And we all passed and we all did brilliantly. And if I'd have let that get in the way, I wouldn't have brought something into my life that brings me a huge amount of joy and satisfaction. That's a personal reflection on probably a time when my confidence was really hit. So doing all these things successfully is why you're here today. We want to steer our own ship. We want to remove stress and have high emotional well-being, and we really want to keep our confidence high. Every change, be that something that starts as feeling positive or something that starts as feeling more challenging, follows a curve. How successfully and quickly you get to the end of that curve is down to you. This is the Kubler-Ross change curve, no relation. And it follows this process of initial shock or surprise. Then there's a bit of disbelief, evidence that it isn't true. That could be, oh, I don't deserve this, or this can't be happening. Or really now? I think we often feel that way with change. Never comes at a good time. Frustration. Things are different. Why am I not getting up to speed quickly enough? Why aren't I getting to that end goal quickly enough? And then sometimes that can get us into that low mood, the lack of energy. This is really difficult. I don't know where to go next. But then as we start to come out of that, we start to experiment. Oh, this is a bit different. Let me try this. And engaging with that new situation and seeing what it can do for us. Then the next stage is decision, learning how to work in this new situation, start to feel more positive, getting some of those quick wins in this new situation. And then integration is, I suppose, the goal. That's when we really feel like we're up to speed, we're comfortable with this change, we've moved forwards, we've made it happen the way we want to. Now, these curves can be more or less extreme up and down, and they can be more or less short or long. And we can, to an extent, control that. So the three most important factors for successful work transitions are clarity, reflection, and preparation. They're actually sequential in my mind, which is why I always start with clarity and then we sort of build into reflection and preparation. And underpinning all of those is support. Now, I'll talk about that at the end. So we're going to start with clarity. And there are three clarity factors that are important for successful work transitions. The first one's mindset, then resilience, and finally proactivity. Mindset. Many people lack the confidence and self-belief to have really successful work transitions. It could be because of imposter feelings. It could be limiting beliefs or stories that they tell themselves that are not enabling them to grab hold of the change and the opportunities. And it could also be because they're being influenced by others and they're maybe being pulled into lots of different directions. And that's because when our brain is in that sort of trying to find stability, trying to make predictions, and it can't, it means we're naturally more open to suggestion from others, which means, well, it's good, but it's also bad. But making sure we get into that right mindset helps us spot those opportunities, handle challenges way better, be proactive, keep our confidence high, reduce those horrible feelings of insecurity and self-doubt, and increases our motivation to keep going. So for the right work transition mindset, you need to understand your current mindset. What are your emotional responses and what are the triggers that are causing those emotional responses? You then have to unpack the barriers stopping you from having the mindset you need. What's getting in the way? The next step is to really understand those then and develop helpful thoughts to replace unhelpful thoughts for that growth mindset. When we talk about growth mindset, it's the difference between growth mindset and fixed mindset. You might have come across this before. A fixed mindset is, I cannot change, I can't do this, I don't know what I'm going to do, this can't possibly be good, all those kinds of making a decision about this is how it's going to be. Whereas a growth mindset is, I can't do it yet. I know I have the ability to change and grow. I can develop. I can take control. Those are growth mindset sort of thoughts. Mindset also helps us focus on positivity, now not to a point of it becoming toxic, right? We shouldn't be dismissing any challenging feelings that we have. They need to be experienced too, but finding a way to move through those and focus on a more positive way. And then exploring ways to take control and move forwards. What am I in control of? And what am I not in control of? The next clarity condition is resilience. Change is really tough, even positive change. It genuinely uses a lot of energy. So, I was saying about the amygdala going into overdrive and that fight or flight and trying to find predictions. It's almost like when your computer is trying to do something, all the fans are whirring, and it uses a lot of energy, which is why you get given lots of sweets and chocolate when we do training courses, because the brain needs feeding when it's going through change and has got new ideas in it. There's a lot of fear from uncertainty because of that fight or flight response, and that can sometimes feel demotivating and frustrating. And I see a lot of people come to me where their resilience is run down, either by toxic situations they've come from or find themselves in, going through a lot of change all at once and having to make big decisions. But having that resilience strengthens your ability to handle those emotional challenges that come your way, helps maintain that positive outlook, even when things get really tough, and reduces stress, improves our overall well-being. So resilience is really, really important. So I help people identify and reframe those unhelpful things they tell themselves that are driving down their resilience. Sometimes those stories have been given to us from toxic situations, difficult managers, or a situation. Sometimes they're things deep within us, maybe things we've been telling ourselves for a long time. Pinpoint what is helping and what is hindering their resilience. And that can help explore coping strategies, because all of us are different. People get energy in different ways, they recover in different ways. So it's about experimenting with what works and what doesn't work, because ultimately we're looking to relight that fire and get that fight back again. The third clarity factor is proactivity. And I will say, as an ex-hiring manager and a senior leader, that proactivity was the major differentiator I saw between successful and unsuccessful transitions, but also people and careers. Taking charge of your own situation gives you more control, helps you clarify what you need and want from your career and your life, and it genuinely gives you a competitive advantage over your peers. It's very obvious who's being proactive and who is not being proactive. Having the strength to be proactive does rely on that mindset and resilience work having already been done, because you need to be feeling strong, you need to be aware of your strengths, reminded of your confidence, and then you need to go back to your own values and goals. Who am I? What's important to me? What am I going for here? What do I want to get out of this? Then figure out how to get the information or connections you need to start moving forwards. Understand what you can control in this situation linked to your goals. Explore how to control those controllables, but also importantly, let go of the things you can't control, which sounds super easy, right? Never is. Never is. So I wanted to share with you Sarah's story. Sarah's story, this is an anonymized client story, but it's a real client. Sarah was a senior leader in the data industry, and she just landed a new job after leaving quite a toxic work environment. The culture seemed really toxic, and also the really difficult, challenging manager. And the stress from her previous job and the messages I think she'd been told and had absorbed from that situation and those people left her doubting her skills and her ability. This new job that she had was more days in the office and a longer commute. So it was also having quite a significant impact on her home life. And she was just about to start this new job when she came to me, because she knew, having tried to prepare for the new role on her own by reading books and articles, trying to think about what to do and how to prepare, it wasn't enough to help her feel positive. And she didn't really know how best to prepare for this and get her out of that situation and give it some closure and move forwards positively into this new role that she actually really wanted to feel more positive and excited about, but wasn't yet. So I helped her just become more confident, understanding the roots of the self-doubt and what stories she was telling herself, focusing on her strengths, reminder of what she's capable of, why she was hired for this new job. I created a quiet, dedicated space for this exploration and reflection that's so important for getting through that change curve. And it was away from busy home and work life. She was often frazzled at the start of our sessions, but then once we got into it, it just was giving her the space she needed. She slowly began to trust her abilities again as she started this new role and started getting stuck in with the right mindset and the right attitude. And she was super proactive about putting herself in the right position. She trusted her abilities again and came up with effective ways to balance the new demands of this job on her home life and her work life. She started exceeding expectations really early. She got some of those all-important quick wins, and she quickly became a trusted leader in her new company. And it was like talking to a different person. She worked super hard on it. But I wanted to share that story because it's really common to have that kind of situation come along. And I think that getting proactive and putting the hard work in on the foundations can then have that massive overall impact. So that was Sarah's story of getting clarity and moving forwards with it. The next step or important factor in successful work transitions is reflection. There are two essential reflection conditions for successful work transitions: making the time to think and digging deep within ourselves. Now, if I had £1 for every time somebody came to me and said, I'm too stressed and busy, I don't have the time to think, I would double my income in a year. I get that this is really, really hard, and I struggle with it myself. I know when I was working in corporate, I used to put aside a couple of hours every Friday. I block it out in my diary, and that was going to be my thinking time. I was going to think about the week. I was going to think about the team. I was going to think about the strategy. I was going to think about my own development and make a bit of time for it. I'm sure you can imagine how many times out of 4 in a month that actually happened. It's really difficult when you've got conflicting priorities, nobody respecting your diary, but failing to create this time can lead to making rush decisions, increased stress, and ultimately actions that are not aligned with your goals. Because if we're not clear on what our goals are and how we're going to go towards them and be deliberate, how are we going to get there? So making the time to think is so, so important, but I get it's easier said than done. It's probably one of the biggest challenges in work transitions is time. That's why sessions with me, I like to call them thinking appointments, because it holds that time in the diary and holds people accountable for it. I just do 1 hour sessions. Some coaches do sort of an hour and a half. I think it's too long, especially with something as intense as change. But they're convenient, booked in advance. It creates that right environment for the individual so they can do their best thinking. They're safe spaces for emotions. There is absolutely no judgment. Get tears quite a lot, and that's absolutely fine. And it's 100% focused on the individual in front of me. And I'm always in their corner, whatever they want to achieve, wherever they're at, whatever they're thinking or feeling. The next reflection condition is digging deep. This is all about recognizing the roots of thoughts and feelings that are happening. And it's so important to understand what these are and where they're coming from if we want to overcome obstacles, address underlying issues, or maybe regular development areas or feedback that we've had in the past that we really want to ditch for moving forwards into this change, developing strategies, and moving forwards in a way that's really authentic to us, because we're all different. But without understanding what's actually going on deep within us in these thoughts and feelings, people often get stuck in these kind of repetitive thinking patterns. They swirl around, they just can't get out of them. They end up feeling frustrated and they just can't move forwards, and that hinders their professional and personal development. So it's super important to really understand what's going on within you. So together with my clients, we uncover those underlying beliefs, experiences, triggers, get new insights into themselves. Part of my job is to hold up a mirror and say, oh, it's interesting you just said that. You said that 5 minutes ago, and I don't really know how those fit together. Developing strategies to grow. Coaching is all about moving forwards. It's not like therapy where you look backwards to sort of understand various things. It's about saying, okay, what is this thought linked to? Where is that coming from for me right now? How is it affecting me right now? And where do I want to go in the future? Part of my job is to listen really deeply to help people do that. I always used to think I was a good listener, which is why I took this career path, right? But I'd been on loads of coaching courses in corporate and things, and I thought, yeah, I'm a really good listener. But then when I did my coaching qualification, I learned a whole new way of listening that was like next level. And I was, wow, okay, there is actually so much to this. And it's important, as well as listening, to then absorb that and hold it back as challenging questions, because otherwise, if we don't question things, we never move forwards, do we? So digging deep is all about being heard, being challenged, really looking at things in a different way in order to understand ourselves better, to move forwards in a more positive way. Isn't that moving forwards? There we are. So I'd like to share with you now David's story. This is David's story. David had just started a new role at a much bigger global company. And initially confident, he was starting to motor, but then he found himself coming up against unexpected challenges. He was struggling to connect with his manager. Super common. Felt overwhelmed by the high expectations and the sheer volume of opportunities to shape the role. Anyone ever come up against an opportunity to shape a role? It's awesome, it's exciting, it's brilliant. But it's also like, well, I don't know what the expectations are. I don't have something specific that you've given me. And that can sometimes lead to huge amounts of stress. Emotionally, David felt really isolated and frustrated. And that just led to this spiral of self-doubt. And he felt he couldn't really talk with anybody at his new organization because he didn't want to lose credibility. And after my experience of that, well, there are 15 people behind you if you can't hack it. I get where he was coming from. He started by trying to handle it all on his own, believing that just working harder and longer hours would help him overcome these problems. But that just made him tired, less resilient. And it also then started to trigger some old perfectionism challenges that he really struggled with. And so then he had to deal with that as well. And he was really quite overwhelmed and in a bit of a state when we started working together. But I helped David identify what was working, because there were loads of really good things that were working, what specifically wasn't working and having the biggest impact. Helped him view his manager differently. You can't change somebody, right? But you can change how you interact with them, your responses to them, how you choose to feel about it. Understand his perfectionism, where that was coming from. He had a real aha moment there about actually it came from quite a competitive relationship with a sibling that was still going, and that he just really wanted to be the best. And that actually wasn't serving him anymore. And then he also wanted to try some new approaches. We experimented. That is the way through change, this experimentation. So created this safe space for him to let it all out, share his feelings, explore the challenges, think differently. He learnt to better understand and communicate with his manager, control some of those perfectionism urges, and start to manage some of those imposter feelings. And ultimately, he started to improve his relationship with his manager. He built a bigger and better support system, set clearer boundaries, felt more secure, connected, supported, and capable. And then that had a knock-on positive impact into more time for activities out of work. And he just needed to dig himself out of it. So that was David's story of reflection. So we've talked about clarity, we've talked about reflection, and now we're going to talk about preparation, another key factor for successful work transitions. Now, I personally love a bit of preparation, but I get not everybody does. I just want to talk about why it's important. Most people don't prepare and plan thoroughly, even if they love a bit of planning. I think probably because linking back to that time stuff and the mindset stuff we've already talked about, which is why they're so fundamental. But feeling prepared and having a plan gives you control and a confidence that others will notice and feel. This is super key to the swan effect. Without it, you lose time, because if you're trying to plan and prepare while doing all the stuff that you're going through in a change, it actually puts you back on the back foot, and you can lose that credibility and make poorer decisions. You end up wasting loads of time. So preparation of some degree is really important when going through any change. That's why we do the work on what can you control and what you can't control first, because there's always something you can control, even if you feel there isn't. So I help people figure out what you need to prepare for, how best to go about it for them. If that means we get colouring pens out and bits of magazines, not my vibe, but some people love that, that's fine, we do that. And importantly, the next steps for getting it done. Plans are well and good, right? But if you don't know what's the next natural step to move it forwards, it's not going anywhere. Now, sometimes we think, yeah, well, there's no point putting a plan in place because there's so much change going on. I'll put a plan in place, it'll change tomorrow. And I always say that's okay. It's much better to have a direction, at least, a deliberate direction that you're moving forwards with, that you can pivot and adapt, than having nothing at all and just sort of floating. Things don't always go to plan. It's okay. So here's Claire's story. Let's get Claire's story out. This is Claire's story of how she, a hater of planning, was able to plan for her next career move. She was a senior manager in a marketing firm and discovered that a restructure meant her role had changed. It was way less enjoyable and lacked in the development opportunities she needed. She described it as they'd just taken all the fun away. She dreaded planning. She didn't hugely like structure. It just made her feel stuck, uncertain, frustrated. And she wasn't making the time to plan for the next career move, partly because she didn't really enjoy it, but she didn't really know how to go about it. But she knew she needed to plan this next career move and redefine her development plan for the new situation she found herself in. She had a mentor, so she spoke to them, but the mentor told her what she already knew. You need to work out what you want and make a plan to get it. But she was struggling, well, how do I do that? And she kept getting stuck in the same loop of thinking. So when she came to me, She wanted to make this well-informed career decision and future plan. So we went back to the basics: her values, her goals, her options, and the controllables. We spent time really clarifying her true wants and needs in her career and in her life, because they're inextricably linked, aren't they? That then led to some authentic decision making that she was really confident in. It challenged some hidden assumptions that she had, particularly around what her career was going to look like, what the company owed her. But also it boosted her confidence in her decision because we'd done all this foundational work. We broke the planning down into just manageable steps, and we tried to do it in as fun way as possible that really suited her. We also examined the dislike of planning a little bit, and I think a lot of it came from fear. We found ways to overcome those, or at least like get them manageable again. And we experimented with approaches to help her plan in a way that worked for her. She made a really confident career decision, created a development plan to communicate her needs back to her company, rediscovered her career mojo, and she just felt clearer, calmer, and more confident in her decisions. So she actually decided to stay in that organization, despite the fun being sucked out of the role. She decided to communicate what this development plan needed to look like for her, what she was now missing, what she needed in order to be able to enjoy this role again, develop, etc. And she got everything on her list because she was really clear. She showed the benefit, she communicated it, and she fought for what she needed and wanted. And I think she's still there. This was about a year ago now. I think she's still there. So she was able to take control of that situation, put a plan together, and get what she needed. So that's a good example of somebody who initially didn't really like planning, finding a way to plan and take control of her own career. So we've talked about clarity, we've talked about reflection, and we've talked about preparation. Underpinning all of those is support. Unfortunately, the reality is many lack the support necessary to handle change and optimize it. Often organizations, well, when I speak to organizations, they often say, oh, no, it's not a problem here. Nobody says it's a problem here. And I'm like, yeah, that's because nobody wants to say it's a problem here. So people just don't talk about it. And so many people try and go it alone, and then they end up wading on all this challenge. But having the right support removes that isolation, provides reassurance, yes, you are doing the right kinds of things, and helps maintain that emotional balance that we've talked about being so important for spotting opportunities and moving forwards. There are two types of support necessary for successful work transitions. The first one is internal, and the second one is external. So what do I mean by those? So internal. This is within your organization if you're in one, and also friends and family. Friends and family are so important to involve in this process because unconditional support is so valuable, and they look at what you're going through from a much more personal happiness perspective. I remember way back when I started my career, I joined a graduate scheme, 1 year in sales, 1 year in marketing. And at the end, I had to choose. I'd been told I'd done really well in both, and what did I want to do? And I was so gripped by this decision for such a long time. And when I made it, my then partner said, oh, thank goodness you chose sales. You seemed really unhappy when you were in marketing. And so that was actually a really useful perspective and really helped me feel more confident in that decision. Co-workers, managers, and mentors inside an organization, if you have one, or inside a community, for instance, small business community that I'm in, they understand your workplace really well, and they're so useful for getting feedback and hearing different experiences. But that internal support, be that from co-workers, managers, friends, and family, is rarely enough because both of those come with heavy bias. Their friends and family just want you to be happy. Your co-workers, managers, mentors, there could be all sorts going on there. They might want you to stay in a role because they don't want to have to recruit right now, or they might want you to move into a different department. Yes, because it will give you breadth, but actually because they need to promote someone else who's going to leave if they don't. You just don't know what's going on in the background for these people. And that's why it's so important to also have external support. For example, coaching, what I do. It gives that objectivity and confidentiality that are thinking game changers. So objectivity means somebody can bring anything. I often get people saying to me, I can't believe I'm about to say this out loud, or I've never said this to somebody before, because there's no judgment. So you need to be able to say what is ever on your mind that you might not be able to say to friends and family or co-workers, managers, mentors. And the confidentiality means you know it ain't going anywhere. There's no politics. There's no consequences. This is just one with an experienced, qualified, and accredited coach helps you challenge your thinking, find new perspectives, keep on track. And that is why I do what I do. So, how do you go about getting the support that you need, both internal and external? Do share how you're feeling with selected friends and family. Be really mindful of who you spend time with and who you listen to, both at work and at home. Sure, we can all think of someone in our friendship group or our family that are maybe a bit negative or really have decided they want your life or something to go in a particular direction. So be mindful of who you spend time with, because they say that we are the sum of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And I'm sure we can, if we reflect on that, really think that's true. Consider what support might be available within your organisation. You could identify a couple of co-workers with whom you feel comfortable talking to. But if you're talking to anybody, make sure you set really tangible objectives for each interaction and be mindful of their biases. So, for instance, I want to talk to a peer of my managers because they went through a change like this a few years ago and they seem to make it really successful. So I want to specifically ask them about that experience. But you need to be mindful of biases. But they're my manager's peer, but they've been in the organisation a long time and they might want me to stay or whatever. Like, there's going to be certain things that may impact their ability to advise you objectively and confidentially. And then external, identify a coach's experience in change and transitions. Like what? Check that they're qualified in coaching first. There are so many people out there who aren't, and accredited with a professional body. Again, so many who aren't. I offer a complimentary discovery call, but make sure you're prepared for it. Take that proactivity advice and work with someone you feel you can open up to and that gets you. Some studies have shown that any therapeutic interaction, so coaching or therapy or something like that, the relationship is 40% of the outcome. It makes such a big difference. So zooming out for a second, my top tips for successful work transitions: be proactive, work on your mindset, work on your clarity, do the preparation, be mindful of who you talk to, their biases, what influence they might have on your brain that is currently more open to these kinds of things right now, and get the right support. You don't have to do it alone. Navigating change and making big decisions is not easy. It takes loads of energy, loads of proactivity and strength, and loads of support to get it right. That's why coaching one-to-one with me is a solution that includes the 4 things that are most missing: confidentiality and objectivity, challenge, dedicated time, and digging deep. So with most people, I start on a kind of initially weekly, then moving to every other week, confidential 1-hour online coaching sessions, booked in at a time that suits you. I also help people know how to prepare for these, because quite a few people haven't had experience of coaching before, or they might have just had internal coaching, and you want to maximize your investment. And I offer 100% autonomy. Like, my style is very much, I don't take notes and I don't set homework unless you ask for it. So some people say, I want to be given tasks, or I have some neurodivergent clients that want me to make notes or just send them a couple of bullet points afterwards. I will totally flex to the individual, but I do fundamentally believe that your development and your progression is down to you. So how does it work? So if you're interested in exploring working with me, or just want to speak to me about transitions in general, there's absolutely no obligation at all. You can book a free online context call via my website. This QR code takes you straight there. The process is then it's a 45-minute conversation to just understand where you're at, what you're going through. I try and add some value. And then if it is something you wanted to progress, you can get a tailored quote from me, book your first online session, and start the work. And anybody that attends my webinars and then goes on to work with me, you get a free 1-hour accountability session 6 months after completing your coaching program to check in that you're continuing the good work. So if that's something that you do end up wanting to do, then just quote that when you speak to me. My current availability is tight. I've got 2 slots left to start working with me this month going into next month, and I'm on holiday 24th to the 9th the 24th of November to the 9th of December inclusive. So if you are interested in just having a no obligation call, please do book one for next week. I have got availability. You can see my calendar directly through this QR code and this link. Love to have a chat with as many of you as possible. I love to hear how people are getting on, what they're going through, so that I can offer the best I can in these free sessions and also deliver for my clients. So at the moment, I've got 2 more slots left that would start with me for when I'm just back from holiday, so early December. So if you're interested, please do book a call. I'd love to speak with you. No obligation. So go smash that transition. Whatever is on your mind at the moment, whatever change, you have it within you to absolutely smash it. So thank you for listening. I hope that's helped you think a little bit differently about change, about work transitions, about the situation that's on your mind right now. I hope for the person that asked about the reorganization and not identifying themselves with the company values anymore, got something out of that. I'm going to open for Q&A now. Often find people want to ask me the questions in a call rather than on here, which I completely understand. But I'm opening up the chat now for questions, if anybody has any, while you're thinking of some questions. I just want to reflect a little bit more on that situation in the chat previously about the reorganization. Hopefully some of those stories gave you a bit of a feel for other people's experiences in that. But I can completely understand the not identifying with the values anymore. And it can make us really unhappy when we're either in a place or working with people that don't respect and mirror our values. They are fundamentally what makes us who we are and focus our direction of our lives and our work. So that's why it's important to understand, like, what are your values, and be able to articulate those and identify which of those values is being compromised in this situation and why and how. Because that then helps you go, I know now what needs to be different. So for me, freedom is absolutely my number one value. And I was finding it difficult when my wings were clipped. And it took me a long time to actually realize that's what was really making me feel the way that I did. But once I knew that, I could design a life that gave me the freedom that I needed, which I now live, which sounds like I'm living some amazing dream, but it's not, it's hard work. But it fits me better. So it's understanding what values are being compromised, what needs to be different so that they're not compromised anymore. And I often talk about, when you know your values, you're looking for a situation or a job or whatever in your life that is ideally ticking as many of those values as possible, because that's what makes us fulfilled, happy, feel like we belong. But I say sometimes you can't tick all of them. In fact, often you can't tick all of them. But we're just looking for a situation where we're not compromising any of those values. We want to be ticking the box really strongly on a couple of them, but not compromising on the others, because it's that makes us feel really unhappy. And that might be what you're feeling now going through this reorganization. So definitely advice for the person going through the reorg and not necessarily feeling connected to the values anymore is go back to your own values, do that clarity and reflection work to be able to start moving forwards. And I'm happy to help with that if you want to have a quick free call. So I'll give it a second to see if there are any final questions. Other than that, we will wrap up. Let you go and enjoy the rest of this, unfortunately, quite rainy Friday afternoon and have a lovely weekend. If we've not had any more questions come in on the chat, I hope that was helpful. Get in touch if you'd like to chat. Next week availability is pretty good for now. But take care, have a lovely weekend, and go and smash that work transition. Take care, all the best. Bye-bye.